Good morning.
Okay. Questions?
What have you seen from Trevor Lawrence this season and his development with the new coach?
You see, he's doing a good job of getting the ball out quick. He has a lot of weapons out there, but the receivers, the backs, and the tight ends, I know the one guy, he's hurt, he's on IR, but the other two are coming along. But the ball's getting out quick. The thing that's strikingly different to me is his footwork. And again, I'm not a quarterback's coach by any stretch of imagination, but I watch a lot of him, and just the improvement of his footwork, I thought, has been really, really telling in terms of how he's able to get rid of the ball. I think he does a good job of extending plays, in terms of when he goes to scramble, him stepping up in the pocket to throw the ball down the field. It's real impressive to see that. So he presents some challenges. And then on top of that, he could get the ball anywhere on the field, but he could also run. So.
Speaking of his weapons, one of them is Travis Hunter. When you look at the tape, what stands out to you about him?
And again, I'm not saying this to BS you guys at all, but the first thing that jumped out to me, Heisman Trophy winner, you know all that stuff about him, and he was a great personality when I met him at the Combine. But the first play that stood out to me was when he was in the close position to the end man line of scrimmage, and he was, I forget what team it was, but he was blocking somebody. And, it was just, again, I attribute that to him as a football player, him in terms of his attitude, but also knowing EB, the wide receivers coach there. I mean, he's going to make those guys block, and you could see it throughout the room. But to see a guy of that, coming in with that stature and that pedigree, I mean, he was blocking somebody, and he did a good job, almost pancaked him. So it was an interesting play to see. That's what stood out, aside from his obvious wide receiver skills.
How impressed are you about the way he's able to play both sides of the field? Obviously, you have to worry about him as a receiver more than anything, but the way he has the endurance to.
And I know it's been limited in terms of the amount of plays, but it's so funny with this league and this game. It's not anything new. It's not anything. We've seen guys do it before. Obviously, they're a special breed of player, but I'm sure the organization there, they're just trying to do what they think is best to help him win games. So if he could do it, he could do it. So, I mean, any well-conditioned athlete, I'm impressed by that, but that's what they get paid to do. They got to be conditioned physically and mentally, more so for me mentally, thank God, not physically, but, that's part of their job.
You're studying him now as an offensive player because you have to try to stop him, but I know you probably looked at him scouting-wise as a player. What stood out in terms of his cornerback skill?
He's solid across the board. I mean, he learned from one of the best to ever do it, at the line of scrimmage. But, again, that was a long time ago. But I haven't watched crossover tape now with that. But, I remember his ability to press at the line of scrimmage was impressive.
Patrick, I know on a game-to-game basis you're focused on getting ready for your next opponent, but how much do you get a chance to observe your practice squad players, and how important is that element to a team?
That's critical for any pro coach. I mean, we have a job to do. Again, I'm the coordinator, and, coaching the coaches, coaching the players, and putting together the plan. But also, our program, and Pete, I'm sure he said in his opening press conference, we're developmental coaches. Our job is to develop the team, and it would be negligent for us to not look at the practice squad players because, it's a collision sport. Those guys are going to end up playing for us. So for me, it's watching it every day. I'm paying attention to it between periods when the look team is out there. I think it's critical. Some of the best players. I mean, think about it. Jonah was on the look team at first. So, some of the best players I've coached came from the look team, Jamie Collins didn't play a whole bunch of defensive snaps his first year. He was mostly special teams, and then he ends up being one of the best players I ever coached. So, if you're not doing that, you're not doing your job, in my opinion.
Do you give yourself a little bit of time, maybe organizationally or you individually to say, man, happy for him?
Oh, yeah. I mean, all we got is time. I mean, again, during this part of the season, the families – thankfully they let us do our thing, and we're here a lot and get a chance to watch tape. And I think it's important as a teacher to give them feedback. Hey, this is good, but also it's good to give them feedback. Listen, don't think I'm not watching this. If you're playing with high pad level on the look team, how's that going to give me confidence for you to play for us for real games? So always give them feedback. That's part of being a good teacher, I think.
When you had the opportunity in the bye week to do self-evaluation and look at your defense as a unit, what was your, biggest takeaway?
biggest takeaway was, trying to minimize the third and shorts. So again, this league, and just throughout my career, we spend so much time on third down, we spend so much time in the red area, which is warranted. But it's the first and second down plays, like you think about some of the drives we've given up. Sometimes they didn't even get to third down, or they got to 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 3. That's not even really third down right there. I don't know what they're going to do there. They could run, especially nowadays. They could run. The quarterback can run. They could go for it on 4th down with all the analytics. So my job, the self-evaluation, is I got to put these guys in a better spot on 2nd down. 1st down, pretty solid. 2nd down, got to do a better job on 2nd down and try to create some longer 3rd down situations. So that falls on me.
I know after games you like to turn the page and move ahead, but is that particularly true in the Kansas City game where?
Yeah, you know that. Why'd you ask that question? Gee, yes, obviously. No offense, but yeah, shit. I mean, now you're going to get me in trouble with my mom. Yeah. Mahomes having 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3 and 3rd and 1. Yes, it's a problem. Sorry. But come on, man.
Okay, guys.
Y'all good? All right.
Thank you.
Earlier.
Chip, there's always so much talk about the adjustment process that like a rookie player has to go through, or a quarterback has to go through when it comes to joining a new team. Just as a coordinator, just what's that process like for you in terms of getting adjusted?
Yeah, I think for our whole staff, just getting it was, really learning your players and what their strengths are, and then how do you play to those strengths, compared to who you're playing. You know what I mean? Like this, hey, this is a great team to throw the ball 60 times against. Well, if that's not your strength, then that may be a great thing to do against them, but that may not work out the way you wanted it to. So I think the longer you're together, the better understanding you have an understanding of what players do. You learn that some players are inside receivers because being an inside receiver and being an outside receiver are two entirely different things. The picture that they see is totally different. Some guys can really flourish, and there are other guys that it gets confusing. So they're better outside looking in than they are inside looking out. Same thing on the offensive line. Guys can play because they're athletic enough to play multiple positions, but what is their best position? Trying to sort that part out, as you're still getting ready to play opponents and play teams. So, and as you're sorting that out, what are their strengths? So what do you do? What type of run scheme do you match to the 5 offensive linemen you have? And then obviously you have to adjust because when you lose Colton, then all of a sudden now you got to add another guy to the mix. So what are his strengths? And without having seen him that long, starting to learn Stone a little bit more and what he can do and where we are with it. So there's that whole process of everybody when you have a new staff that's getting together with new players, even though the players have experience and the staff has experience. We've got a bunch of guys here that have coached the NFL for a while, but we're all learning each other. So that's a process that's always ongoing and will continue to be ongoing.
And doing some self-evaluation as from the offense during this bye week, just what stood out to you, and where do you think this team can take the most necessary strides at?
Yeah, again, it depends on who your opponent is, but I think we got to do a better job. The one thing that's hurting us are the STPs, so that's sacks, turnovers, and penalties. So, in those categories, and you got to look at them all specifically. So look at every sack that's happened. Was that a byproduct of a good rush? Was that a byproduct of a scheme? Was that a byproduct of a player breakdown? Was that a byproduct of a missed assignment? Same thing with every turnover that happened. What was the reason for the turnover, and how did that happen? And then is there a recurring theme to it? So if there is a recurring theme, then there's an easy fix of how do you do that, or does everyone have its own identity to it? And then the penalty part of it, because when you're not playing downhill football and you're going backwards, so you have a 1st and 10 to a 2nd and 6 to a penalty, so now you're 2nd and 16. Well, 2nd and 16 is a difficult conversion in this league. So, trying to stay ahead. And then why did the penalty occur? Was it a missed assignment? Was it a technique issue? And then detailing it out with the individual players when that happened to them.
Did you teach a lot off the Kansas City tape, or is that one you just wanted to?
We teach off of every tape. So anytime you have film and every time you have an opportunity, there was a prime example. You're moving the ball and you get a penalty. So now you're 3rd and 16 against a really good defense. And the issue in that game is if you can't stay on the field, they're going out for 17 play drives, 19 play drives. You're not going to get the ball back for a while the way they were clicking on the offensive side of the ball. So that's all part of it. But you look at everything and you teach off of everything. They're all opportunities for us to improve. I've never been of the thing, let's get rid of that game and bury it and then let's just move on. Well, then I think you're shortchanging your ability to get better. What happened, what were the reasons that it happened, and then let's make the corrections.
Chip, as an offensive coordinator, how did not having Jacoby impact you?
Yeah, I think anytime you don't have Jacoby, anytime you don't have Brock, anytime you don't have Colton, three of your top players, that has to impact you. But everybody in the NFL deals with the same thing. I don't think there's anybody right now that's playing with the same starting lineup that they started the season with. So that's just part of the deal. There's that fine balance of getting the backups ready, but you only have X amount of reps in practice because the rosters are so much different than college. In college you got 120 guys on a team. In the NFL, you have half of that. So you have to be conscious of how many reps can you get, and if you're going to get those reps, if it's a 10-play rep period, how many go to the ones, how many go to the twos. So you got to train your ones and hope your twos are learning from the situations, but they haven't been thrown into that just because of the limited amount of reps. Walkthroughs are an important part of that. So, Jacob's a big part of what we do. Not having him was an issue, but it's the same. No one feels sorry for you. No one says, hey, you got a couple guys out, so we'll give you a couple points before you start the game. It just doesn't work that way. So it's you just have to adjust and do what you can do with what you have. So.
How difficult is it to do what Travis Hunter's doing and trying to learn plays on both sides when you're a rookie?
Travis is a special player. I got a chance when I was at UCLA to play against him at Colorado, and I think he played every snap on offense and defense in the game and had an interception, was catching balls, and, he's truly a unicorn when it comes to that. I think his competitive stamina is, that's the one thing I always kind of marvel at because, this league is tough and every play counts in this league. And if you're running 60 plays on offense, it's taking everything you have to run those 60 plays on offense. And then you flip around and you got to play defense. Usually when you're done, you drive down the field, you score a touchdown, you get a chance to go sit on the bench and go over what just happened, look at the iPad, talk about what our next operation is going to be and where we're going to get the ball and what that's going to look like. Well, if you're out on the field, that's difficult. So I've always kind of marveled at what he can do. And, I know a lot of people doubt him. I've seen him in person. I don't doubt him. He's a heck of a football player, and it's impressive what he's doing right now.
As you get healthy now, bringing back Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, can you go back to where? Yeah, right. Exactly.
Today we got practice this afternoon, then tomorrow, then Saturday, and then, it's the same thing. Like we lost Adam Butler in pregame warmup after they put the 46-man roster in, and I've been there before. I had a player when I was at San Francisco that broke his leg in warmups, and that's all of a sudden you're like, well, you have three tight ends dressed. What does that do to your goal line package? What does that do to your short yardage package? Because you can't now put another guy up. So I've always cautioned when they say, hey, you're getting this guy back. And my wife says, oh, you're going to get all these guys back. And I said, if it's 1 o'clock and they're standing next to Pete when we're kicking the ball off, then I'm like, yeah, let's go. That'll be good.
Conceptually, you saw what it looked like in New England when it was, relatively healthy, and you're getting close to that, hopefully, like you said.
Yeah.
You talk about it changed sometimes how you called plays without them. Obviously, now it's a readjustment to with them on the field.
Yeah.
But how excited would you be?
No, you're excited. I mean, they're both special players, and obviously integral for what we're doing and for our ability to execute. So, but I also know we have to be mindful of he hasn't played in a while. So, you can't put him in there for 75 snaps and just say, hey, we got him back. There's a easing in process with some guys that have been out for an extended period of time. So, and a lot of that comes from our sports science department, and we'll consult with those guys. Pete will consult with those guys of, what do you think the adequate rep count is? Knock on wood, they're available, and then what it is, and then piecing the game plan together off of that. But it's, obviously I think that anybody in this league would be excited if Brock was back, and we're excited, and I know he is too because Brock loves football and has worked his tail off. And I think, sometimes when you get an injury, it's hard because your mind is like, I'm good, I can go, but your body's not cooperating with you. So right now it looks like his body and mind are cooperating, and that's a good thing.
What do you think Tyler Lockett brings to
I've seen Tyler for one practice, so that was yesterday. I know who Tyler is. He's been an impact player in this league. Did so many great things when he was at Seattle. Coached against him, and he hurt us all the time. We played him, so he's a really special player. But when we've actually been on the field, it was yesterday. So we've been a walkthrough with him, with 2 walkthroughs in practice yesterday. So continuing to see what he can do and just grasping. I think the good part about it is him and Gino have a history together. So Gino can kind of explain, and a lot of times in this league, everybody's running the same thing, but somebody may call it one thing, somebody calls it another thing. And so it's just learning the terminology, and he's really sharp. So, excited to see as he progresses during this week, how he can help us.
Pete always talks about the run game and having an emphasis on it. How important is it to really get that going to be able to open up this offense?
I think it's always important to get anything. I think you can't play one-sided. You can't be one-dimensional when you play football. You can't throw it every down. You can't run it every down. You have to be able. If you do it, defenses are too good. You know, if they know this is all this team is going to do is chuck it, well then, you know, the schemes that these people will bring from a pass rush standpoint and a coverage standpoint will be very complicated. You know, so you got to be able to not let them hone in and say this is all they do on this down. So you want to be balanced. If you're balanced, that's a good thing. You know, if you're running the ball more, it probably means you're winning because that means you're in a 4-minute offense, and you're going to run the ball more in a 4-minute offense than you do in a 2-minute offense. So, you know, if you're ahead at the end of the game, you're going to get more rushes. If you're behind at the end of the game, you're going to get more throws. So you always want to be on the side of more rushes because that means you're probably in a 4-minute mode and you're trying to run the clock out. So
That's good. Thanks, Chip.
thanks, guys.